So I'm happy to be here also in person. Last year I was like most of the time online. So it was a bit different experience. It's funny to see the room, which I saw from my screen in my living room at that time. So it's nice to see, meet you, and so on. Of course, thank you to Andrew, to Michaela, to invite and to always introduce with the right people and with interesting people, as Sofia Felicon, and I'm pretty sure there will be many more coming. Myself, I work as an artist researcher. Field of research started to happen just because the topic which I was intrigued and interested in was actually the species which also Sofia and Feli spoke a lot, is jellyfishes. So, but before I start to speak about that, the situation with the oceans and seas is mostly this what I have behind me, you know. There is like overfloating of the boats and the boat traffic, and this is what is happening on the surface, and what's happening under the surface then. In the result of that, it can be hurt very strongly. So in my today's talk, I will also present one of my projects which is dealing with this kind of underwater noise pollutions and what is happening on that. So the species which kind of was my entry into the more marine or aquatic environments and aquatic lives is jellyfish, Aurelia aurita, or moon jellyfish, which is one of the model organisms in biology. And in the 2012, when I was for the first time in Marine Station for residency in Izmir in Turkey, there was just like thousands and thousands of them in the bay in the February, which was not a typical month. Neither was this the time that they should appear in these kind of big numbers. So I started to look into it and started to be intrigued and interested with the species from all these different points of views. And in the work, it resulted then in two variations. It was done in 2014, and this was also the work which Michaela referred to. So in 2014, this was developed as two different variations. I will show short clips from each of it. So I really wanted to speak also and think about the species beyond human to avoid our human impact and imprint into them somehow. It's hard because I'm human, I speak about them, I build the environment for them. But still, I really wanted to have a space where the jellyfish and the soft robotic sculpture, there will be just interaction between them. Conceptually, what I wanted to achieve was actually to talk about the... What I wanted to achieve was to talk about this, you know, like how far can we reach and what happens after that. And then the second part of the project, I was thinking that it would be interesting also to develop more as a interactive in sense of like me and jellyfish interacting with each other. So there was in the concert hall. So in the concert hall, the jellyfish are present in the space. I'm present there. Half of the sound is navigated by them. We developed together with Slavko Glomocin, an excellent programmer, the code, how, depending how they move, what they do, and how they navigate, they're changing the soundscape from half of the thingy, and the other half was done by me. And then on the end of the performance, I kind of disappear from the stage. So this also speaks about this, you know, like, yes, we can be together, but, you know, through the knowledge what I or, you know, we have now about them, about their 500 million years of development and our really much shorter time, I'm pretty sure they will be surviving and staying in this environment longer. So, and then when working with the jellyfishes and developing the frames of the project and so on, it can go also much longer and deeper, but as I said, I will jump through the projects, and if somebody wants to have more in-depth conversation about how to even bring this animal into the laboratories and what does means to bring them into the galleries and so on. There's lots of debate opening up with this project always, and I'm happy to talk with them also later on or with question and answers. But when I was doing lots of field trips and doing my stay in marine stations in different points around the globe, I started to be doing also lots of field recording with hydrophone. I brought it also with me. I'm happy to share my equipment, so whoever wants to go to record whatever, I'm happy to show how it's used. It's very easy, and it's welcome, and it's very interesting because it's just another world which we don't hear otherwise. Because, when we go, I think some of you have experience of diving, but, this is more like dark radar sound environment. You don't hear actually what is around you because you hear yourself breathing in your bubbles. And when I started to record with this kind of hydrophones and so on, I started to be curious because, naively how I approached the topic was like, I will listen to the bioacoustics and it will be amazing. And it is amazing, but the problem is just that most of the bioacoustics which we hear is then very quickly overrun by the noise. Similar like we had technical problems here with these noisy situations, and we cannot speak over that because it's mostly very irritating for us. It's in the oceans and seas even harder to navigate. So the sound which we listen now is actually a recording of shrimps, which we managed to record them in Bergen in one little bay in fjords. But then very quickly, in my compositions, I like to compose with the sounds which I get, but I put them into different layers. So it's not only the real feel of the space, but it's kind of like my imprint of specific time which I spent there. And, very quickly you hear also all these deep sounds, it's like the aquatic. Because of physicality by itself, the sounds already vibrate and we can hear them differently. The very annoying thing is that they're mostly what we hear when we are inside of the ocean, and when we put the hydrophones in, is mostly boats, vessels, ships, seismic research, different stuff, and I like to say that, as humans, we are very visual animals, visual seeing is one of our main sensors, but in the oceans and seas, this changes really quickly, by 200 meters already the twilight starts to happen, and, so then the species which they live there, they're actually navigating, of course, with all different sensory perceptions as hearing, pressure, because, sound and the pressure are very connected. And because most of the oceans and seas actually quite deep, there is, of course, there is lots of coastal areas next to the places where we live, but there is also lots of deepness where the visual imperative is not so important anymore. So just as a quick intro into the topic, which I think it will be also interesting to discuss further on, and also Feli and Sophia opened up, is like this, that also the frequency, the ranges which they're happening and so on, they could be really quickly solved and changed. I like to say that noise pollution is one of these stupid pollutions, because it's just like that, if the boats are just going slower, if the machinery, because, by the propellers you have lots of implosions of the little bubbles, which they're doing lots of noise also. And if you just change more into electric motors, different way of using of the machinery, it will already solve it. Because there is lots of pollutions, which I will talk also later on the project which I collaborated with Gino Šutić, which is not so easy to solve. But this one, I think it is. So also because of physics of the water, who I mentioned before, the sound travels 5 to 7 times longer and deeper in the oceans and seas than in the air. we can experience then when it's foggy. In the fog, the sounds, especially the high pitches and so on, they can really reach out really far. And I will not go into the details of decibels now in this moment, but we can talk about this also very happily also later and debate about that, because it's always interesting how to see how these parameters, of ecological kind of instability and changes are can quickly change just because of our interaction with the oceans and seas. Like if the sea starts to be, the pH is changing. In the higher pH goes, more uncomfortably metallic sounds can start to happen. It loses the deepness and it goes really high pitches again. So there is different problematics which they're happening with our presentations. So when I do my presentations in different places, I like as an artist also to share the stage with scientists which they are really deeply involved into the topics which they develop. So many times I invite different scientists to speak publicly about the topics then. So instead of just me presenting some situations, I like to share this kind of stages because, I'm working in the field of art, science, technology. I think it's very important to also share the space, not just like refer to each other, not just like, yes, it's great to have inspiration from each other, but I think that we should also go beyond that, So I was really glad also that I was able to do even in this kind of lockdown timings exhibition in this was the instant in Belgium, where the Gluon organization decided to collaborate also together with media industry, because when we speak about industry, what we think, art, science, technology, mostly it's like, let's innovate, let's develop something new and so on. But, how to innovate and think about media is very important, I think, also. So what they decided, they invited 4 artists. So it was like 4 different articles. I was just part of it, So this means they are triggered by you, but then they go deeper into debate about what is happening with this problematic in their shores. Also, just recently happened this that 2 scientists contacted me if they can use my topic of aquatocene as their kind of framework, which I think is always rewarding because mostly I write to the scientists about that. So it's sometimes nice to get emails back in this way. So with Gino, who will also come to talk after me, we started to work together on different, we know each other for some while. We are both based at Adriatic Sea. This is the sea which is part of Mediterranean. It's between Italy, Croatia, Slovenia, Albania, and a bit of Greece. Yes, a bit. And with Gino, we always had this kind of passion to rethink what ecology means. And with the project which we both have been at the residence at Ars Electronica in 2018, we kind of proposed to talk and think about what happens with pharmaceuticals, pharmaceuticals as human bodies and oceans and seas, because, lots of research about interspecies communication can go also into that through our urine or through different chemical inputs into each other, we can also communicate somehow. We understand what is happening, we give each other impulses, and as pharmaceutical industry is quite, our bodies consume circa 20% of the pills which we intake. 80%, okay, this percentage can vary a bit, but mostly it's like this, that almost 80% goes out into the dark waters, ocean seas, and So on the end of the day, we're getting this, what we are giving back in our plates, and the circle continues. But the irritating thing is that we are also chemically really changing lots of would you like to add something in this moment, or you will talk later? Okay. So Gino will give you also a bit of different perspective than on the research, because I think it was interesting to work with him. We have been doing lots of citizen science research. We have been trying to figure it out how to present this topic also to wider public, with presentations, with scientific papers, and with art installation. So it was quite ambitious, like we like to be, but I think it's also good because then we could have also a bit more bigger impact, you know. One of the things which I have to say struck me a lot when we have been doing the research, it was also in Vitro Experiments. And here there are two videos of two microorganisms, because, you know, when we started to work with microorganisms, it was from practical point of view, because very quickly you can see the results of your research, because their life cycle is much faster than our human or other species. And plus it was also, but then when we have been working with them and we have been exposing them to different quantities of pharmaceuticals. For the drugs, we just decided, you know, it was 5 people in the lab working. We just said, okay, we all empty our pockets, put it on the table, and just use this for our research. Because we try not to be judgmental with Gina instead of this project, because we are all, you know, the society is hooked on the pharmacy is like one of the booming industries anyway. But, you know, it's good to be aware of what can be the results and how direct this goes not only to microorganisms, but what does it mean this in bigger organisms, you know, because also there is lots of this research happening when they are testing waters in different cities, and then they're announcing how much coke is inside of that, because it's interesting to see how society needs constantly boosters that we can interact with each other, which can be sometimes quite shocking. The project is also, as I mentioned, shown as an art installation, and for that we decided to have very simple hologramic sculptures where you can just see this loop of disintegration of these little creatures in these black models. In 2019, I have been lucky to be able to join also research at the Celtic Explorer. It's like one of the biggest boats for the research in the Ireland. And it was about the Irish coast, because the project was run through Galway 2020, the European capital. And it was great because through that we got like good funding that we could manage to develop the projects. There was like artists, 5 of us, on different stages in different boats. And experience, especially for me, being obsessed with aquatic environments in different levels, I would say. It was also a very great experience to be also with scientists together there, because then we kind of also see how something is navigated, what is done there, what is the procedure. It's not always only fun, because there have been also 3-meter waves, so it wasn't so much fun at first. I was a bit like not so enthusiastic after first day. I was thinking like, why? But then, you know, then you start to get used to it, and it was really great experience. And being on the boat, you know, like there have been lots of stuff going on constantly, because, you know, these boats are very expensive. The scientific team which gets that, they try to do in 14 days everything. So it's like 24-hour operation constant. For me, it was really interesting to get to know these 2 new species. For me, not for, they're very known otherwise. So the Basking Shark is second biggest shark. It's a plankton-eating organism, which is just like filtrating and going and just like floating around. And next to it is like really tiny shells. They're actually 0.5 millimeter big. And also filtrating the waters of the Irish shores. But for me, it was interesting how the cultural impact they have, you know, because the little tiny shells, they're actually the ones which they are building the coral reefs around it, they are like, because of their sticky, they're able to produce some sticky kind of gluey substance, which helps to hold the reef together. And the finding of them, it was like really great, like everybody was super excited on the boat. It was like the celebration day. And the basking shark is just like, it was, even though it is migratory species, it's not just like around Ireland, but in Ireland it's kind of a cultural it has very strong cultural imprint in the sense of like in the 19th century they've been using lots of their livers also for the lighting of their houses and so on. There's still lots of folk stories about it. There's so many different initiatives to check on them. So it's kind of there, like as panda in China, it's basking shark in Ireland. And I would just play a bit of this because I decided to work a bit differently with this project. So it's a 42 minutes long kind of radio show. And with the work, I decided to go first time to work with the human voice also. One of the reasons was sadly the 2020 drama with all changes which have been happening. So I was working online with singers from Ireland. The singing in Sianonos, this is like a specific way of singing through the throat. And for me it was good because, I am a musician. I will have a bit of, I know how to read notes, but I'm not a composer in the sense that I could write with the notes the composition, but I managed to do it with the visual score, which for them was also very understandable because this is also the way how they worked. So it was really interesting to collaborate with each other and work through that. And for the finale of my today's presentation, I will just quickly refer to the work which I was really glad that I had the opportunity to collaborate with Sofia and with Felican. And so we spent quite some nice time together at the Adriatic Sea in the Northern Adriatic in Slovenia, where I'm coming from, in Koper. And we have been, I think Sofia was our human drone, we called her, because she was constantly diving, recording with the underwater cameras and so on. We had also a drone which was giving us problems, so we decided that Sofia is much more efficient in that job. But it was just like, we really wanted to, we came together, we started the conversation with the jellies, obvious, but then we just wanted to also experience the region and refer to it. And in these topics, one of them is definitely Posidonica oceanica. It's like a seagrass, and in area of the Northern Adriatic, there is like the biggest and the most Nordic seagrass meadows. And these meadows are very important. We sometimes forget, but they more than 50% of oxygen that we breathe. We are getting from the oceans. And these underwater meadows and forests of kelp and so on are quite important ecosystemic situations. The other thing was, the flame shells and the fem shells, the Pinna nobilis, they're like so big, and they could be also 120 centimeters big before the extinction started to happen, because it's like this that just unplug this. So it's like this that sadly there is not many of them standing anymore. Mostly what we experienced also from the first hand when we went to record is that that most of them they're just lying on the floor. So they're dying out because there is like some parasitic bacteria which came with the ballast waters, with the boats and so on, also into the Adriatic Sea, which was for the long time one of the last rescues from them. So sadly, they're dying out, but the thing is, that there's always this interconnection between the different species and why they are together in this specific space. So if they're dying out, this means because they're this kind of huge filters for the water. So there is also, of course, impacting other little creatures and also bigger around. Instead of the project, on the visual impact, the scoring system, we collaborated with EU Copernicus database to get for the first part of the project now the 30 years of changes in Adriatic Sea, and we plan to work also further to get into the other situations. I think that during the research we have been all very enthusiastic when Sofia came with the story about the sea silk. It's something that I was really surprised with it. Never heard about this before. But then also we started to, one of the points of the project is that we try to work as much as sustainable as possible, which it sounds very good when you think about it, but it can be very complicated and expensive when you go into the production of the artwork, because it's always easier to do the old way than the new way, I would say. And especially when we are working with biomaterials and so on, many times there is more fail and the fail is actually the good result, So this is something which we are still feel challenged, but we plan to develop this further. So also the textile which we use to talk about instead of the installation is also seagrass, which you found also, Sophia, online and connected with the organization which is doing this in UK. And, so there is lots of possibilities for conversations outside of the project in the sense of like, if we go to the slide before, when I was talking about the trafficking in the oceans and seas, already, that the textile industry, which is constantly bringing everything around microfibers and so on. So there are just like topics coming that we plan to work further on it. So this is now from my side. I hope it was quite not too long. And yeah, as I mentioned before, I'm happy to have this kind of discussions further because I think it's really good and I'm really excited that this is like just ocean topic. I wanted to show something before we finish. Sorry. But just today, in the morning, I got this video from a friend who is just now on the research vessel Falcon. It's like Smithsonian Oceanics. They have the residency program also. I didn't know that she's there, but she sent me this because she was like, oh, I saw the jellyfish. It's 650 meters deep sea, so it's like thinking on you. And I asked her, so she will send us some greetings from the boat, but I also posted her experience, and it's Ale de la Puente, so I'm like, I posted also her experience into our Discord chat, so we can all connect with that. So it's also, I think, good to have somebody at the ocean able to speak up about the ocean. So thank you. Gina?